Good evening. Today is Tuesday, May 7th, 2024, and the time is 6 p.m. I call to order the regular meeting of the following will come to order. The Victorville City Council and the same council sitting as the Victorville Library Board of Trustees, the Southern California Logistics Airport Authority, the successor agency to the redevelopment agency, the city as a housing asset successor, Joint Powers Finance Authority, and Victorville Water District. Madam Clerk, will you kindly call the roll?
Councilmember Gomez.
Present.
Councilmember Irving.
Here.
Councilmember Jones.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman.
Here.
Mayor Becerra.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. At this time, I ask you to stand for the invocation and pledge of allegiance. I will ask Elder Jamal Kiles from Destiny Christian Center, and our pledge will be led by Police Lieutenant Mark Bradko.
Let us pray. Thank you, our love of God, that you have given us this day to meet together, discuss the issues of our city, Father. We thank you right now that you are in this house, that your presence is upon us. We thank you, Father, for the city officials and their councilmen, Father, that you will give them wisdom and knowledge to guide our people, Father, that they will bring them together, that there will be no divide among the people, but there will be a positive agreement upon the policy. We thank you for the peace that's upon us, Father. Father, we ask that you keep them safe, that you surround them, you put a hedge of protection upon them, Father, and as they continue to sacrifice their time for the people, Father, we ask that you bless their family members and their friends, and that we may continue to do well by you. Amen and amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Elder Kiles. If everyone can face the flag, hand over heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. At this time, we're going to have a special presentation. I'm going to go down to the dais.
Liz, did you want anyone else down there with you?
I'll just take it. Last time I did that, I broke it. There we go. This evening, we're honored to receive a resolution in support of our Wellness Center from Assemblymember Juan Carrillo. You're already here, so I'll invite you up. But I'd like to invite our Wellness Center team leads to come forward. Deputy City Manager Janelle Davidson, Planning Lead Scott Webb, Engineering Lead Freddie Bonilla, Code Compliance Lead George Duran, Building Lead Joe Slegger, Facilities Lead Eddie Gleason, and Homeless Solution Lead William Lamas. Now it's your turn.
Thank you so much for having me this evening. I'm here on the behalf of Assemblymember Juan Carrillo of the 39th Assembly District. My name is Risa. I'm the Senior Field Representative. I live here in the community. I work here in the community, and I've seen the issues that we experience here in the community. Homelessness is chief among them, and the work that's been done by the City of Victorville is not just groundbreaking, it has the potential to be revolutionary. Truly. When I got to see the facility at its grand opening, I was stunned. And so I insisted that the assembly member needed to come out and do a tour himself. And he felt the same way. We look forward to sharing this with other legislators across the state, because this should be a model of how we can address the crisis of homelessness across the state of California. So on the behalf of Assemblymember Juan Carrillo, I thank you all for the incredible work that you've done to bring humanity to this crisis and to support our community in ending it. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
Maureen, there we go. Thank you. Thank you, Mujer. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, moving along. Madam Clerk, will you present the agenda and any revisions there too?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are no revisions to the agenda this evening.
Okay, at this time, I'm asking from our council members, any conflict of interest?
No, ma'am.
None. Moving right along. Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak for public comment?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Victorville City Council. Your city council is interested in your ideas and opinions and furthermore endeavors to incorporate them into its deliberations. At the same time, the council must be able to carry out its business in an organized and efficient manner, free from material disruption. Therefore, this meeting will be administered in accordance with the council's established policies and procedures and Government Code Section 54957.9 and 54957.95. Individuals may speak on agenda items or on issues not posted on the agenda during the public comments section, provided those issues are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the City Council. Individual speakers may address the council once per public comment period and once per each public hearing item for up to 3 minutes. Additional time may be allotted for appeal hearings in accordance with the city's adopted policy and procedure manual. Those who desire to comment on a public hearing item may wish to reserve their remarks until that particular public hearing has been opened. All testimony is to be directed solely to the council. Although open meeting laws do not permit council members to engage in dialogue with any speaker during the public comment periods, please know your comments and questions may be taken into consideration by council members when discussing the particular agenda item. The presiding officer may briefly respond or have staff respond to statements or questions, or may request that the staff report back to the council at a subsequent meeting. Speakers are requested to comment as briefly as the subject permits. Once comments are invited, the speaker will be called upon by name, then recognized by the presiding officer. The speaker will state the item number that they will be addressing or that the subject is a non-agendized matter. Audience members may not disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct of this meeting, and those who do are subject to removal from the meeting pursuant to Penal Code 403. Your understanding and cooperation are appreciated. Our first public speaker is Al Catillo on a non-agendized item.
My 3 minutes up. I come up here for one reason tonight, us and the animals. I want to thank you all very much for giving George the go-ahead and fix up the old school for the animals. And I hope you will all come down and take a picture, just like you did here at the school when it's fixed up. Have your name on it, and you can be very proud of yourselves, every one of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Castillo. Our next speaker, Madam Clerk.
Our next speaker is Tangia Bryant on a non-agendized item.
Thank you, ma'am.
Excuse me. Good evening, Mayor Becerra, councilmen, and the residents of Victorville. I'm here on behalf of a new business that opened in the city of Victorville. It's NID Housing Counseling Agency. We are the first HUD-approved counseling agency that has been designated for the high desert. This is a great task that has been successfully achieved. I would like to thank the city of Victorville. I would like to thank the planning department, the building inspector, the fire inspectors that all made it possible so that now we can provide housing counseling services to residents. We are designated by the Department of Housing and Urban Development to provide housing counseling services to the 5 cities, one being Victorville, Hesperia, Apple Valley, Adelanto, and Barstow. And I'm a proud citizen of Victorville. I would like an opportunity, if possible, to provide a presentation at a later time. I know I only have 3 minutes today, but I also would like to just acknowledge that we are a part of a list that was put out by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And basically, they certified us as the housing counseling agency designated for the high desert area. And the services we provide: mortgage delinquency and default resolution counseling, resolving, preventing mortgage delinquency, workshops, home improvement and rehabilitation counseling services for homeless counseling, non-delinquency post-purchase workshops, pre-purchase counseling, pre-purchase home buyer education workshops, rental housing counseling, and rental housing workshops. I'm a very proud certified office branch manager for the Department of HUD. I would like at this time, if possible, we had our grand opening on April 13th. We had a very successful grand opening. However, we were still working on our permits, so we were kind of a little behind in getting our permits together. But since that time, we've gotten our permits together. And at our grand opening, I do have a certificate of appreciation for Mayor Becerra for the city of Victorville. And at this time, I'd like to present it to the Assistant City Clerk or the City Clerk.
The city clerk, ma'am, thank you.
And thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for everything you're doing for our city and the surrounding cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, if we could have our next speaker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We received 2 public comments via email that have been distributed and uploaded to the website, and that concludes our public comment for this evening.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We're going to move on to our public hearings. Our first business in order is item number 1, approval request for the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, required by a draft fiscal year 2024-2025 annual action plan allocating federal community development block grant and the Home Investment Partnership Program home funds. Mr. Metzler, would you kindly introduce this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. This is an item that we're used to dealing with annually, so it's fairly routine on an annual basis. And as you know, the city of Victorville is an entitlement city under the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, which means we receive directly from them a certain amount of community development block grant funds, and we're responsible as an entitlement city for administering all of the elements that go into the program that they require of us. And so with that, among things that we're obligated to do is an annual action plan. And so the annual action plan is effectively a document that is a part of this item tonight that summarizes the work that your staff, along with your CPD grant committee members, which this year were Mayor Liz Becerra and Mayor Pro Tem Bob Harriman, where we relied on staff to do the initial outreach to the community, facilitate the application process, present all the applications to the CPD committee, and ultimately ask for CPD committee's input and feedback to bring you what you have here tonight, which is effectively the recommendation of awards of funds for the 24-25 fiscal year. And with the council's approval of the award, then effectively that becomes a part of their working part of the annual action plan. So with that, this item, I'm sorry, just to summarize the amounts that we're dealing with this year. These are estimates as known to us today and can change, but effectively we were working with an entire allocation, projected allocation of $1.987 million. Which it breaks down into 2 tranches of money, effectively 1.38 for the CDBG and $605,000 for the home consortium. And so with that, this item was authored by your city planner, Mr. Scott Webb, and he is available for any questions or comments.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, would you please read the recommendation?
That the Honorable City Council conduct a public hearing to receive citizen, public, and agency comments regarding the draft fiscal year 2024-2025 annual action plan. Approve Resolution Number 24-033, adopting the 2024-2025 Annual Action Plan as presented for submittal to HUD, which contains the funding recommendations made by the Community Planning and Development Grant Subcommittee. Authorize the city manager to execute all necessary documents for submittal to HUD, and approve the continued inclusion of operating restrictions for food distributors, providers as recommended by the CPD Grant Subcommittee with applicable subrecipient contracts.
Thank you, ma'am. At this time, we're going to take technical questions from our council members. We're going to start with Councilwoman Gomez.
Considering the substantial allocation of CDBG and home funds, what are the primary assumptions regarding community needs that guided the funding priorities outlined in the 24-25 Annual Action Plan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Certainly, there are a number of plans that we rely on to basically, on an annual basis, help guide the allocation and expenditure of funds. And so even at a higher level than the annual action plan, we actually are obligated to adopt what's called a 5-year consolidated plan. Con plan for short, and so that document effectively becomes the higher guiding document, if you will, that helps make sure that it's a process that solicits community inputs, community needs, summarizes community priorities, and from that 5-year con plan, then we use that to serve as guidance when we actually make recommendations on an annual basis through the action plan.
Thank you. And given the varied project funded by the Annual Action Plan, could you describe potential unintended impacts on the community, particularly concerning the integration of low-income housing into existing neighborhoods?
No, I cannot.
The next question is, how might anticipated demographic shifts, particularly increase in the senior populations as outlined in the con plan, affect the long-term sustainability and impact on the housing projects funded by this plan?
There's no impacts that we're aware of. We don't believe it affects differently that community than what's been analyzed as a part of the con plan process.
Could you detail the feedback received from the community stakeholders during the public consultation phase for the Annual Action Plan, and how this feedback integrated into the final funding decision? That was my final question.
Well, certainly prior to this meeting, we actually did hold a public hearing, and I believe you were in attendance at that meeting. So certainly that is a part of the public process, inviting community input. Of course, we have mandatory, what do we call them? Bid process, not mandatory bid conference. Yeah, I'm sorry, mandatory application workshop. Those that are interested in actually submitting applications, we do require attend a mandatory workshop where we also have an opportunity to have dialogue between those parties to help identify, the priorities and, of course, any questions relating to the application process.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Irving?
I'm familiar with this process. I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Councilmember Jones?
I have none. I too am very familiar.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
I have none.
Thank you. I just have one question. Mr. Metzler, in working with this progress, don't we have someone on staff that answers questions through the application process? So they can help them through it. They can, if there's any questions, comments, concern, everybody, it's available?
Yes, we do. And in fact, we have 2 dedicated staff persons. Of course, Scott Webb, your city planner, is the lead supervising the operation, but Liliana Collins, who's been with the city for close to 20 years, if not more than 20 years, 22 years, thank you, has been working with us principally as the lead on this project. We also have in support Elisa Perea as well. Both have been very helpful and instrumental in at least attending to the day-to-day interaction with recipients, subrecipients, and applicants.
Thank you very much, sir, and thank you to the staff and all you do. Thank you. At this time, I'll open a public hearing. Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak?
No, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. At this time, I'm now going to close the public hearing. I will invite a motion for this item.
Madam Mayor, I move that the council adopts staff's recommendation as to points 2 through 4 with point one already having been disposed of.
Second. Oh,
Okay, I have a first by Councilmember Jones, a second by Mayor Pro Tem Harriman. Councilmember Jones, any questions?
And thank you. No comments.
Councilmember Harriman, any comments?
Yeah, I would just like to reiterate what the city manager said, that everything was put together really good. That was my first time participating in that, so I want to give staff a big thank you. And they helped me get through that because I needed a little help with it, but it was put together great and everything went smooth.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Gomez?
Absolutely. Although a lot of us may have been here several years, I think for my personal interest for us as a stakeholder, I like to ask all the questions in case you're a newcomer and this is where you're visiting, or it's through Granicus, that this information is always obtainable. Just because I've been here a long time, I don't think it's something that I would always take as I know and I will never ask questions. No, I'll do the opposite. That's to benefit my community. That's my comment. Thank you.
Councilmember Irving?
no comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I have none. Madam Clerk, will you take the roll?
Councilmember Gomez,
Aye.
Councilmember Irving,
Yes.
Councilmember Jones,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman,
Yes.
Mayor Becerra.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We've now taken action to approve points 3 to 4 of staff's recommendation as presented on the agenda. Item number 2, required public hearing for amendments to the action plans for fiscal years 2017 to 2018, 2018 to 2019, 2019 to 2020, 2021 to 2022, 2022 to 2023, and 2023 to 2024 to reallocate home HOME investment partnership home funding to a community housing development organization, a CHODO. Yes, ma'am, a CHODO project in accordance with the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, guidelines and city citizen participation plan. Mr. Metzler, would you kindly introduce this item? Good luck.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. So this item has relation to the previous item. However, as it relates to the previous item, it's to say that as we undertake our annual action plans, and as you just approved the previous item, it's pretty common for us, especially as we get towards the end of the fiscal year, to actually undertake not an audit, but effectively a reconciliation of the funds, effectively comparing the amounts awarded to the amounts actually being spent. And we work very closely with the recipients to do as much possible to make sure that the funds remain available to them, and even carry funds over if the awards extend beyond the fiscal year that they're awarded. And so this item recognizes that in this current fiscal year and the previous 5 fiscal years, there are funds that have been awarded that have gone unspent and likely will not be spent as originally intended through the award process. So with that, we do have the ability to claw those funds back and reallocate those funds based upon applications received. And so with that, just as you approved an action plan in the previous item, this particular item amends action plans that were approved by this council or councils in previous years, effectively reallocating those funds for purposes actually outlined in the staff report and more particularly identified in terms of the awarded entities. So with that, I think that's the general summary of this item. The better details of it can be answered again by your city planner, Mr. Scott Webb, and he's available for any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, would you please read the recommendation?
That the Honorable City Council conduct a public hearing to receive citizen, public, and agency comments regarding the substantial amendments to the annual action plans for fiscal years 17-18, 18-19, 19-20, 21, 22, 22, 23, and 23, 24. Approve Resolution Number 24-034, adopting a substantial amendment to the annual action plans for fiscal years 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20, 21, 22, 22, 23, and 23, 24 to reallocate Community Housing Development Organization funding and amending the City of Victorville's annual budget for fiscal year 2023-24 to reflect additional revenue and expenditures in the amount of $491,759 and authorize the city manager to execute all necessary documents for submittal to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Thank you, ma'am. At this time, we're going to take technical questions from our council members. Councilmember Jones?
I have none. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
I have none.
Thank you. Councilwoman Gomez?
For public participation and compliance, the question is, can you describe the public consultation process that was followed by the amendments to the annual action plan? And how did the process align with the city's citizen participation plan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. I'm going to ask Scott Webb to address the consultation efforts either required or relating to this particular item. I do know as much that as the annual action plans were originally approved in previous fiscal years by previous councils, they would have followed the same public consultation process that we normally go through, which also includes a public hearing. But as it relates to this item, Scott, here before us today, is there any additional required public outreach available relative to the funds being reallocated?
No, you summarized it correctly. The only additional step is the substantial amendment, which is before you today. The application process that this CHOTA went through is the same as outlined in the prior item, where an application period starts in November, concludes in January, and then we do our proper noticing and public participation that the council was part of in the prior months.
What measures were taken to ensure transparency and effective public engagement during the decision-making process for reallocating HUD funds?
So, well, good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. So this reallocation of funds is due mainly to the CHOTA requirements. We don't particularly get a lot of applicants, and so we've gone a few years with unspent funds. The HUD home program requires us to set aside 15% of the allocation just for CHOTA projects. And with the project, this is the Northgate Village Apartments on Dante. They are a qualified CHOTA, so they qualify to use these funds. They have an eligible expense that we could use the prior funds from prior years on. But to do that, HUD requires a substantial amendment, properly document that those funds are being reallocated this year.
Thank you. Could you please provide a detailed breakdown of how the home funds are being reallocated across different fiscal years from the CHOTA project?
Yes, so as I mentioned earlier, each year we have to set aside 15% of our home allocation. So that's basically been documented and sitting to be used once an eligible applicant comes along. In this case, we have a proven track record with the Northgate Village Apartments, which is a qualified CHOTA. This particular funding will help conclude prior funding rounds that we've gave them in over about 10 years ago, where they rehabbed some of their roofs. So this will continue some of those rehabs to that aging facility.
And what are the specific objects of the CHOTA project that justifies this reallocation of home funds?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yes. What are the specific objectives of the CHDO project that justifies this reallocation of home funds?
It is a qualified expense. This is an affordable housing development. There'll be covenants put in place in accordance with the funding requirements.
And what are the fiscal implications of these amendments for the city's budget, particularly concerning any matching funds or financial commitments required by the city?
There is no matching funds. This is 100% funded through home.
And given the total amount of 491,759 mentioned for reallocation, how does this impact the overall funding strategy for housing and community development in Victorville?
It complements the strategy.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Councilwoman Irving?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
I don't have any questions either. I'll open up the public hearing. Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak?
No, Madam Mayor.
I will now close the public hearing and I'll invite a motion for this item. Motion to approve staff's recommendation points 2 through 3.
Second.
I have no comments on the pen.
Motion?
Yes,
Okay, okay.
I have no comments on the pending motion. Councilwoman Irving?
No, ma'am, I don't have any comments. No.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
I do not.
Councilwoman Jones?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councilwoman Gomez?
Not at the moment. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, will you kindly take the roll?
Councilmember Gomez,
Aye.
Councilmember Irving,
Yes.
Councilmember Jones,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman,
Yes.
Mayor Becerra.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
We've now taken action to approve points 2 and 3 of staff's recommendation as presented on the agenda. We're going to move on to the consent calendar, items 3 through 12.
I would like to bring attention to items 8 and 9. I have a couple of questions on those.
Sure. Councilwoman Gomez, go ahead and proceed your questions to Mr. Metzler.
For item 8, how does the settlement with Janet Kwong align with the guidelines established under ordinance number 2400 for administrative citations that are related to excessive cannabis cultivation?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think this item is probably better answered by the city attorney, who's the author on that item.
Both of these settlement agreements, both for 8 and 9, are consistent with direction from the city council, and they are being structured in a manner consistent with the municipal code.
Thank you. What percentage of the total potential fines and fees was ultimately settled in the case? And does this compare to other cases with the similar ordinance?
These settlements are consistent with prior direction from the council and the policies adopted by the city council.
Thank you. For the next item that I had a question, 9. This is for management of active bonds and investment risks. I was wondering what strategies? Yes,
Councilwoman Gomez, 8 and 9
I already did 8.
and 9 is the same thing. It's settlement agreement.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So my question, yeah, right. Sorry. What strategies were in place to mitigate the potential losses from investments that were held by third-party trustees? So this one I wanted to discuss.
Councilwoman Gomez, these
bonds.
were discussed in closed session. They were brought to our attention. I think
Oh, okay.
we've already addressed it up to this point. That's why we're at a settlement agreement with them.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Thank you, ma'am. At this time, I'll invite a motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the council and the council acting on its various boards of directors take action in accordance with the recommendations set forth on the agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, will you take the vote?
Councilmember Gomez,
Aye.
Councilmember Irving,
Yes.
Councilmember Jones,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman,
Yes.
Mayor Becerra.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. We've now taken action on items 3 to 12 in accordance with recommendations set forth on the agenda. Moving on to written communications, item 13, Citywide Community Facilities District, a CFD presentation. Mr. Metzler, would you please lead us on?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. This item was brought to you in large part because we rely as a city on our strategic plan to guide our progress and also use that strategic plan as a means to prioritize things that are meaningful to our community. And among the strategies that we've adopted as a council 2 consecutive years, one of our goals has been to promote financial sustainability, and that's certainly been at the forefront of everything that my administration has been focused on for the last 6 years. And in doing so, one of the things that we have been looking at over the years is the costs associated with operations and maintenance, the long-term costs associated with operations relative to development. And so one of the things that we have done over the course of time is conducted some analysis. We did bring on some professional help, Web Financial Services, who will actually be given a presentation here to actually help us analyze the long-term economic impacts of developments such as new residential and commercial development, and try to quantify if over the long term, the life of commercial or residential development, is the residential or commercial development paying for itself? And we have constantly believed, especially as it relates to residential, that residential doesn't necessarily pay for itself based upon the property taxes, for example, that are generated. And so as we believed that, we actually brought in Web Financial Services to help quantify that, first test that to determine if it's true, and then quantify that for us. And one of the things that we've done, certainly at the Planning Commission level, especially as we entitle new projects, we actually have started conditioning new development, particularly seen on residential tracts, to where we're requiring the developers to mitigate their long-term economic impacts. What does that mean? I think the classic example that I've used sharing with anybody has been, look at some of our older residential tracts, our 40-year-old tracts, for example, and you look at the condition of their roadways as an example. And one of the challenges that we've certainly shared with this council last August, and we intend to do it again this August, is share with you a presentation just on the money that we have available for roads, how we prioritize our investment in roads. And of course, you can see very easily that there certainly isn't enough money to go around to deal with just roads. And it's more than roads that we're concerned about. So one of the conditions that we've started imposing at the Planning Commission level is requiring development to have a mechanism to mitigate their long-term economic impacts. And so effectively what we've done with this presentation today is we wanted to use this presentation to introduce to you the concept of using a community facilities district, particularly maintenance components and public safety components, to actually be assessed against properties, be assessments that would be initiated and bought into by developers effectively to mitigate their long-term economic impacts. That way we have an ability to effectively stop the bleed, if you will, especially as it relates to development that hasn't yet happened, but is going to happen. And so with that, we've got a presentation that we wanted to share with you, provide you with a lot of information about how a CFD works, so that when we bring it forward at a future date, presuming the council is receptive to that, then you're at least having the opportunity to be informed, ask questions, before we eventually take it up at a later meeting. So with that, this item has been authored by your Deputy City Manager, Ms. Janelle Davidson. Of course, there's been a lot of heavy lifting associated with the project of this magnitude, which is Melissa Cretchent. She's here in case there's questions that go our way as it relates to administering the program. But then also we have a team from Web Financial Services that I'll recognize: Heidi Sheppy, Brett Howard, and Matt Chesney, and they'll be leading the presentation before you tonight.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, do you read the recommendation, or they read the recommendation, please? Thank you.
This item is for informational purposes only and does not require city council action.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. My name is Heidi Sheppy. I'm with Web Municipal Finance, and I'm going to give you an overview of how we've progressed on this project so far. Introductions, as mentioned, Heidi Sheppy with Web Municipal Finance, and with me is my Senior Finance Manager, Matt Chesney, and my Finance Manager, Brent Howard. This evening, we've done introductions. I'm going to give you a brief overview of community facilities districts, just kind of a high level of what they are and what they're used for. We're going to go into our understanding of the city of Victorville's needs, and then the project before you, the citywide CFD, with a follow-up of next steps, and then any questions you may have. So the Community Facilities District legislation was a result of Proposition 13, which limited a city's ability to collect ad valorem taxes to an extent to provide for funding for various services and infrastructure. So the creation of the Mello-Roos Act came around, and there we now have CFDs that provide for long-term financing for public agencies. So a Community Facilities District is a separate legal entity. It is formed to provide by any public agency that is authorized to provide public services or facilities, and requires a 2/3 vote of the landowner and or registered voters if there are 12 or more within the boundaries of the Community Facilities District. So a CFD is a flexible tool that allows for cities and public agencies to provide funding for infrastructure and services. It placed the burden of new development, so the costs associated with new development on the new development. So new homes, new property owners are paying for the increase in services and demands on the city, as opposed to putting that cost and burden on current existing property owners. The mechanism for generating the revenue for a CFD is through special taxes. Special taxes are governed by the rate and method of apportionment, which is a legal document that's approved through the formation process. Property owners within the boundaries of the CFD are responsible for paying the special taxes annually on their property tax bill. And the special taxes are a general benefit, so there's no specific special allocation or an engineer's report required. And the special taxes cannot be based on value like an ad valorem special tax or an ad valorem tax on your property tax bill. This is just an overview of what services can be funded through a Mello-Roos Special Tax District. The services must be new or enhanced for public safety specifically. The services provided for a new neighborhood development are considered different than those provided for something undeveloped. So as soon as a development occurs, public safety is considered enhanced or new service. So here's just a list of other services that can be provided through a Mello-Roos district. So considerations when forming a services CFD, the types of services to be provided, in this instance, public safety and operations and maintenance, whether or not to make it a citywide annexable CFD or to do standalone CFDs for every new development that comes along, and then the different special taxes, whether you have separate special taxes or just one special tax for all services. Those are things that we considered and looked at when we're evaluating this project. And this is just kind of an overview to show you that the city of Victorville is not doing this on its own, that there are many other local agencies that have enacted services CFDs to help fund those very vital services that are needed by the city as development occurs. So for specifically the city of Victorville, we are addressing increase in the needs of services provided and or outsourced, generated by growth in population and increase in costs of those services to the city. Services impacted that we're specifically looking at are public safety, operations and maintenance, and code compliance. So for the City of Victorville project, we're presenting for you an annexable citywide CFD, which would be a CFD where any new development can annex in through a single council item action instead of having to go through a whole formation process. And we can talk about that in more detail later. We are recommending 2 separate special taxes. So you'll have one special tax that will be allocated specifically for public safety and another special tax that will be allocated for operations and maintenance. They'd be governed under different fund numbers and different budgets, and they would come in separately from the county when you receive your apportionments. We are looking at the highest level of public safety that was established in the city's public safety plan from 2020, using metrics of a 10-beat system to allocate the costs for future build-out and development and the needs of public safety. And we are allocating the special tax for residential and non-residential property. So the special tax for operations and maintenance is going to be based upon the requirements of each development that comes into the city. So whatever that development is bringing into the city as a maintenance for the city would be how that calculation is conducted for that development. So every development will have their own separate rate that they're paying based upon the requirements that they're bringing into the city. The public safety special tax is based upon a build-out projection, and it's a per capita cost multiplied by capita per household, and that's how we're developing a rate per household for the public safety special tax. And the public safety special tax is being allocated to residential and non-residential to make sure that both residential and non-residential that share in the use of the public safety would be sharing in the burden of the cost. Where should be pointing this?
There we go.
Okay. So to give a little bit more detail, the public safety, we're allocating residential and non-residential as described. 80% of the future cost burden will go to residential property, with 20% going to non-residential, and that's based on a sampling of data and call outs to residential versus non-residential. We are proposing to have that tax escalate on an annual basis at the greater of CPI or 5%. Just to keep up with the annual increase in cost to the city of providing public safety services. And again, we are assuming a high level of public safety for the city. The public safety special tax will be at a set rate for single family and multifamily, and every new development that annexes into this CFD will pay the then prevailing rate at the time they annex in. So all residential and non-residential property from now into the future would be paying the same public safety tax that escalates on an annual basis. The operations and maintenance special tax, as I mentioned, will be calculated as each new development comes into the city with their metrics that they're bringing into the city. So the square footage of street that they're bringing in that needs to be maintained, square footage of landscaping, a percentage of traffic signals, and parks, whatever they might bring into the city that the city will be required to maintain, will calculate their specific rate at the then prevailing costs when we do that budget. So whatever the costs are to the city when they annex in, that would be the cost we use to calculate the budget. And then that rate will escalate on an annual basis as well. The rates are proposed to be separated out to single family and multifamily. So they'll be paying different rates, and then affordable housing for low and very low income will be exempted, and that has been worked into our calculation as well. So this slide gives you an overview of average rate for a single family home and an estimated tax bill. So what does this burden look like to a future property owner? So we've taken an average home price for the city of Victorville and then calculated some of the standard ad valorem property taxes that are seen overlapping within the city, and then included our public safety tax, which is calculated out to be $525.35 per year, and did a sample maintenance CFD tax calculation, which I believe is included in your staff report under attachment A, to give you an idea of what that might look like, what a maintenance tax might look like. So for this particular development, it was $689.79. And you can see that that brings a total tax bill on an annual basis to about $6,350, which would be a 1.5% effective tax rate, still leaving room for your development community to have their skip or bold CFD programs and not exceed the industry standard of a 2% effective tax rate. So the city of Victorville is benefiting from public safety and services, and the development community still has their ability to have their special tax as well. And The public safety tax, as I mentioned, is a tax that would be stagnant, so all properties that come in would pay the then prevailing rate. The maintenance tax is the one that can vary depending on development by development. So we put this slide together to show you a couple of local agencies that have a similar program to give you an idea of what the variety of that tax might look like. What's the mean, the low, the high so far in those other agencies, just to give you an idea of what a maintenance tax calculation could look like. So you could see agency 1, the minimum we've seen is $79. So it must have been a small development with very little maintenance requirements of the city. But you can see in agency 2, we had a maximum of $1,320, which could potentially mean they had a lot of streets, a lot of landscaping, they brought in a bunch of trees. It just really depends on what that specific development is bringing into the city and what the costs are for those maintenance items. So it can vary on a case-by-case basis, and you'll see that as annexations occur into the CFD. The maintenance special tax, I think the previous slide, will be proposed to escalate at 2% or CPI, whichever is greater as well. So both of them will keep up with inflation on an annual basis. So the city's not, contributing to the payment for those maintenance services from the general fund. So next steps, at some point in the future, assuming receptiveness of the council, we will be bringing forth a development to form the CFD. So one of your new developments in your community will have to come and vote to form your citywide CFD, which will create an annexation area boundary for future developments to annex in. So that will have a 3 council meeting action requirement. The first council meeting will be a resolution of intention to form the CFD. That will have all of the rates set forth, all of the maps, boundary maps, annexation area maps. And then that will just be well, I'm sure it'll be an action item for you, and that will kind of give you an overview of what the CFD looks like. The second meeting will be the public hearing and election. So that's when the city council will hold a public hearing and the election will be heard. And hopefully you'll have a favorable vote from the developer or property owner to form the CFD. And then you'll have a third council meeting, which will be a second reading of an ordinance, which will approve this special tax. And then future annexations will be brought to you as a one-item petition and waiver signed by a property owner for you to approve annexation into the CFD. And with that, we are open to questions.
Thank you, ma'am. This time, we're going to take technical questions from the council members. I would ask the council members, please refer their questions to Mr. Metzler first, and he can refer them to our guests. So we're going to start with Member Jones, Councilmember Jones.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just to be clear, this is a new CFD. Is it citywide?
This could be citywide, but it's for new development.
Right. But when we have the developer come in and want to annex, we're going to go through this whole process. Is it intended to be a citywide CFD at that point?
Yes.
It is, okay. And what part of all of this would be considered O&M? What falls under that?
Heidi, you want to take a stab at that?
Yes, so there's the 2 special taxes that we're proposing to be included in the CFD. One is for public safety and the second is for operations and maintenance. So the figure you saw in the sample tax bill, the $689, that would be the amount that would come to the city to pay for the maintenance of the requirements in that community.
Does that include landscape maintenance?
Yes.
It does.
Yes.
And then, Mr. Metzler, if something like this were to go forward, I mean, I understand the benefit to it. It's a little bit of a shock. So I'm going to have to give this some additional thought for sure. But if this goes forward in some form or fashion, could this mean that this would relieve some pressure off the general fund to take care of existing areas in our city? You gave an example of people that live in residential areas that are 40 years old and in decline.
So I would answer it simply by saying, yes, it would provide relief. It would provide relief not just to general fund, it certainly would provide relief to Measure P, and there's other funds throughout the city. But I would say it a little bit differently, that absent this type of mechanism, we're going to experience growth. And I'll use fire as an example, because I think fire is a good example, especially when you think about where the largest amount of new development is going to take place. And it's going to take place on the very western peripheries of our city, west of 395, or even southwest 395 Bear Valley Road. And so those are stretching our limits in terms of where your existing response is, say, for example, from a fire perspective. And so absent a mechanism like this, speaking about fire specifically, there's two funding sources that we rely on to pay for our fire service, and that's general fund and Measure P. And so if, for example, we see another 1,000, 2,000 homes in that area west of the city, it's effectively going to yield additional response, calls for service. And absent a new funding source, basically to pay for their proportionate share of the costs associated with fulfilling those service calls, they're going to be relying on the same funding source that we currently have today for Station 315 or Station 313 when it's very likely and very possible. That's why we're currently undertaking a standard of cover to determine what should fire service look like futuristically, and are we going to require more fire stations, as an example, when this new development takes place. If you don't have the funding mechanism like this, then you're going to be relying on Measure P and general fund solely to pay for not only the construction of that station, but certainly the human cost of actually operating that station. So effectively, what this type of mechanism does, and why we're encouraging that this mechanism be considered, it's effectively mitigating the costs of service that new development's triggering, and therefore actually paying for effectively the nexus increase of the service demand that they're going to be placing on our city. That we have a funding source basically to help pay for the services that they're going to demand from you.
Okay, and then what impact, if any, is this going to have on developers in terms of diff fees?
In terms of diff fees, this shouldn't have an impact. No, this is more so specifically to pay for the O&M associated with police and the certain O&M items that are baked in the maintenance CFD component.
Okay, and then I have a feeling you're going to punt this one, but of the 8 cities listed in the presentation that have CFDs, do we know how that's been working for them overall?
I would like Heidi to address that, because she's more versed with how those cities are using those programs.
Yes, so we work with a number of the agencies on there, as do some other members of teams that we work on. And I mean, it's a valuable tool that other cities rely on for providing these services. Without the city, the CFDs for services. And I mean, there's different structures to them. Some of them come in, every new development has their own CFD. Some cities lead facilities CFDs and condition maintenance as a part of it. But without having these components, the burden would be on the city to use funds that would be otherwise available to the city to pay for these items. And it just, the budgets get stretched thin, especially with increases in costs for public safety and other services.
So overall, your general sense is what from the feedback that you
Overall, my general sense is that this is something that cities are taking on and seeing as an opportunity to help, mitigate the impact on the general fund, and other cities are very positive in their programs.
One of the things that I think about is, all of these unfunded mandates we get from the state that hit cities hard, and then we're facing right now, I don't know what the May revise is going to end up with, 70-some billion dollars in deficit, right? That's going to impact cities one way or another. So could this be viewed as some type of hedge, I guess, against those kinds of?
Your time is up.
I guess you could look at it that way, but quite honestly, I don't think we necessarily look that deeply into the effect of the state budget and the policy of the state. I think more than anything, what we've been focused on is obviously our revenues and expenses, considering our growth, trying to determine how to best way sustain long-term our finances, and what we have always believed is that residential development doesn't pay for itself. And in fact, this study actually helps prove exactly that it doesn't pay for itself. And if we want residential development, especially new residential development, to pay for itself, we need to put in some type of financial mechanism to directly offset the costs of services that those residents are going to demand.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilwoman Irving?
Yes, well, Councilmember Jones covered a lot of ground there, so I think I understand when you say that the burden of the cost of the CFD will rest on the new homeowner, correct? When you say that that the CFD is going to be citywide, does that mean that older subdivisions are able to tap in, or is this solely for new development, correct?
Solely for new development.
Okay, all right. Okay, let me ask another question, and maybe I don't really understand. Would that not, if that's the case, when we talk about the blight in some of the other older subdivisions, wouldn't that kind of create a disparity in areas of the city? You understand what I'm saying?
I think I do create a disparity in the sense that because you have certain developments that are annexed into, say, a CFD because they're newer. I think you're trying to suggest that the theory being that their areas would be maintained better than, say, those areas that aren't maintained, that aren't in a CFD. They're maintained to a lesser service. Now, I guess theoretically that could occur, but I think that's ultimately our responsibility as the city to try to balance that. And so certainly, we have a struggle right now, as we shared in just the basic roadway presentation about the present value costs associated with maintenance citywide. Absent a mechanism like this, I think we run into a similar situation for more than just roads citywide. But having a mechanism like this in place, at least you're able, I believe, to have a better chance at addressing those areas that don't have a mechanism built in, and perhaps prioritizing the other limited funds that we have differently so that you can better attend to those communities' needs, basically the existing developments needs that effectively don't have this type of money mechanism to pay for it.
Well, I understand the mechanism and how it benefits the community, but how much of the cost will the new homeowner have to shoulder? You know what I'm asking? Because you're already going to have a mechanism in place that keeps pace with services, the rising cost of services. Did I understand that correctly? And then how about the rest of the city? How will you figure that out so that everybody carries his or her, every part of the city's carrying its own weight?
So effectively, we would have to
Is that another conversation at another date?
it could be. Because at the same time, we've had a similar conversation. I think the question that you're asking is very similar to the question that we've been asking relative to the problems that we're running into with the LMADs. And so it feels exactly the same as that. And quite honestly, and I think the answer is similar in the case of the LMADs. For those types of areas that are looking for special benefit, that don't have special benefit assessments in place, we'll eventually have to go to them as well. If those neighborhoods, let's say the existing development is not being maintained to an acceptable standard, we would probably have to do something similar to what we're doing with the LMADs, which is do an outreach, try to create some awareness, share with the residents that there are mechanisms for them to participate in to help actually shoulder some of those types of costs so that they can actually improve their community as well. Those are things we could do above and beyond at least managing our existing money resources to try to stretch in their direction.
Okay, thank you.
No further questions?
No, ma'am. Thank
Well,
you.
Councilwoman Gomez?
Can you explain the rationale behind dividing the special tax revenue into two separate funds for public safety and citywide maintenance? And how will the funds be proportionally allocated? And what mechanisms are in place to ensure that both funds are adequately financed without disproportionately benefiting one over the other?
So the separation of the two special taxes is because they're separate services provided by the city, separate areas, separate departments. So we separate them out because we'll have separate budget calculations with different escalators on an annual basis. Those monies are transferred to the city from the county under separate fund numbers so they can be allocated to each of those services and departments accurately per a budget that's put together on an annual basis to make sure that the funds that were collected for maintenance and operations pay for maintenance and operations, and the funds that are collected for public safety pay for public safety services.
How will the introduction of these special taxes impact the development and the valuation of future properties, both residential and non-residential, within the CFD?
Well, the impact, I think I'll answer by saying I think it's subjective. It's going to be dependent upon a lot of variables, but I think the best subjective answer I can give you is that having this type of mechanism in place certainly allows for a better opportunity for a community to be maintained to a standard that can sustain fluctuations in value due to, say, a lessened maintenance program or condition. I think as to the first part, I think your question was regarding the fees or the
The special
breakdown.
tax impact.
So I think we outlined that. The impact is effectively those two items basically being levied on the property taxes of each individual property and collected through the property tax collection process.
Are there any provisions or exemptions in place for new non-residential properties that might be affected by higher taxation under this new district framework?
Not that I'm aware of.
And with the annexation under the CFD, what specific measures are being taken to protect very low-income residential dwellers from potential tax increases that could burden their financial stability?
I think Heidi addressed that, and I'll go ahead and let Heidi address that again for you.
Yeah, so low and very low income affordable housing has been excluded from the calculation and they'll be considered exempt.
How does the city plan to address concerns that annexation and subsequent developments might lead to gentrification, especially in neighborhoods with historically lower property values?
I think we'd have to deal with that if it were to occur.
And are there any specific programs or fund allocated to assist those who might be displaced or severely affected by property value shifts and tax adjustments within the CFD?
Can you restate your question, please?
Yes. Are there any specific programs or any types of funding allocations that may assist those who can potentially be displaced or severely affected by property value shifts and tax adjustments when the framework of a CFD comes into place?
No.
And how does the city project with the long-term economic impact of these CFD changes on both residential and non-residential properties? What are the long-term economic impacts?
I can't quantify them other than what we've shared with you in the presentation. What we do know is that the long-term economic impacts are costly to the city without this type of mechanism in place to mitigate the costs for the new development.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gomez. Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
Okay, I'm gonna try to be in layman terms. Okay, when the word annex comes in, I'm a little confused. Is that the CFD is already in place and the developer annexes into the CFD? We're not talking about existing homes annexing in, correct?
That is correct, though I think technically an existing home could annex in. I think it's not expected.
The CFD pays for new or enhanced services, so existing development would have to change in some way significantly in order for them to benefit from a CFD.
So this would be similar, like you, and I might be repeating what you said. So this is gonna perform and take place just like trying to get the people to vote to change their LMAD. So it has an escalator in it with a 2/3 vote, or no, that's 50+1. I'm sorry.
So slightly different. It's going to be a little bit earlier in the process. I think the process that you're talking about as it relates to LMADs, that's effectively existing property owners. So slightly different. The process that we're talking about now, first is going to start with a developer voluntarily participating in the initiation of the formation of the actual district. And once that's established, say a new tract development establishes that CFD district, there's a little bit of a process, and I think it was outlined in the presentation that initiation process, similar to what we do for other special benefit assessments, that will come before the council. Now, subsequent new development would effectively be applying for an annexation into that district. Now, I don't recall if that subsequent annexation comes back to this council, or is it?
Yeah, so the subsequent annexations would not be required to come back to the council, but for transparency, I think the city has elected to have the, like, kind of a consent or maybe action item, just have one resolution approving the annexation so the council's aware of every new annexation that comes into the city.
Okay, when you have the CFD all in place, that isn't going to mean that they have more police patrolling in that area. That would be citywide.
It would be on a citywide basis.
Okay, and so then just like you were mentioning the fire department and any of those services, I'm not sure how the annex. I know I'm probably just not understanding it correctly, but if I just don't see existing homeowners wanting to be part of a CFD.
They wouldn't. They wouldn't, and in fact, the way this one's being created, it sounds like they likely can't qualify to annex into this because unless, again, they're creating a substantially new demand for the services that this CFD is paying for, they wouldn't be eligible to annex in.
Okay, but the benefits of the CFD would be citywide.
Correct.
That is correct.
Okay. And I think that's it. I think I got it. I just have difficulty. I just want to make sure the benefit is for the city, not just certain areas. And maybe I should compare it to an HOA. An HOA pays for their services, and you can't say, oh, well, I want to join that HOA. Nobody's going to want to do that. Does that make sense? I told you I'm layman term. So
it does, but this the collection for these services are at a citywide level. They're basically establishing a collection mechanism for the added cost that they create associated with their development. It's not to say, you're going to put a deputy in the neighborhood of this, initial forming CFD. That's not how it's going to work. It's basically to have that CFD area pay for the cost of the additional service that's necessary, and necessary at a level that's similar to the level that we're offering currently to our residents.
Okay, so it's pretty much gonna perform like the diffs, no?
Diff would be for capital. I think the closest comparison that we can give you would be, say, the well-forming LMADs and DFADs that we currently have, in that they are special benefit assessments. They're formed based upon a geographic district, or they collect from a geographic district, and they pay for special services associated with the development, the impact of the development. And so that's probably the closest thing we have. And I say that also because they go through a similar process where there was at one time the initial formation of the district. And then as we have it now, even though it'll be coming forward basically for consent or awareness purposes, we do go through a formal process with the LMADs and DFADs where you actually have to go through the initiation, the engineer's report, and then eventually basically a vote of the property owner. Usually it's property owner, very few property owners at best. And then we open the ballots, and then that constitutes the vote, and then they annex in.
Okay, all right, I have no more questions, thank you.
Councilwoman Irving?
Yes, I have one more question. Mr. Metzler, break this down for me. So when I think about who the new homeowners are the new developments where they are located, who's moving in, you're telling me that the tax bill for these new homeowners will increase yearly? And that the benefit of public safety will be citywide?
Correct.
So the new homeowner, and I'm speaking up because I'm somewhat of a new homeowner. I'm going to carry the burden of public safety for, not me, but
Your time is up.
throughout the city. Is that what you're saying?
If you're a new homeowner in a CFD,
Possibly, right?
so if you buy a new home and it's in a CFD area, your home that you purchase is going to bear this burden
Of public safety.
cost, public safety, and then the maintenance component as well. Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Can I ask one more question? Do I have
Yes.
time? Hold
Um,
7 seconds.
Let me have Heidi. I think Heidi wants to add on to that.
I just want to clarify. real
Hold on,
quick.
everybody.
Okay.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, so the public safety component, it's a calculation of an increased need of public safety as you have more people in the city. So as these new homes are developed, new communities come in, we've calculated to say, here's your future build out, here's what the future need of public safety is going to be to maintain a high level of public safety. And this is the burden that new development is going to bring into your public safety system. So as you have 1,000 new people come into a development, if you have one officer per 1,000 people, you need to have funds available to pay for that new officer. Not to say that that new officer is going to be dedicated to that development. That new officer can service the entire city, but that development is creating a need for that new officer. So that development is going to carry the burden of paying for that new officer to some extent
Owners,
on their property tax bill.
yes, will increase yearly.
Right, and so there will be an escalation of that rate because the cost is not going to stay stagnant, right? Your contract with the sheriff's department, they don't just say, here's the cost and that's it. We're never escalating it. You have an annual escalator which can increase over time. And so we intend to propose to escalate that on an annual basis at CPI or 5% to maintain the ability to pay for that new officer in the long term.
Right, I guess where I'm having, the hiccup. Oh, I'm sorry.
Do me a favor.
Okay.
Let's give Councilmember Irving and the other two council members a minute each to finish any other questions they have, because Bob.
I'm gonna stop at
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
where my concern is the increase in tax annually. And it's my understanding, I could be wrong, that in other communities or subdivisions, neighborhoods, whatever you want to call it, the problem that exists right now is that they don't have an escalator. And that's what I'm hearing.
For some of our LMADs, that's exactly the problem, and that's why we've been trying to find a way to change that. But that is a problem. Has more to do with the original formation documents many years ago when they were originally created. By structuring it this way, and building in the ability to have an inflator, we're avoiding a repeat of the problem that this city has with some of its LMADs by not having the legal authority to make those increases in the COLA.
I hear you. Thank you.
Councilmember Chairman?
So this isn't a cost that the developer passes on to the home buyer. This is going to be on in their escrow account, just like the school bonds and that type of thing.
It'll be all collected through the property tax collection process.
Okay, so it's nothing that the developer is going to pass on the sale of the home or add to. He's not paying it, right? He or she. I'm sorry.
The developer is passing on the mechanism basically to the property owner.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Councilmember Jones?
Madam Mayor, I believe I was out of time, but I do have a couple
a minute.
questions. If
I gave everybody a minute. You want to go ahead?
That's very generous. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So with regard to the few LMADs that we have that don't have the built-in escalators, if something like this were to go through, it kind of, gives a little wiggle room for the city to address those areas a little more efficiently. Not solving the problem, but it helps potentially.
I don't believe that's correct. I believe this would be to supplement the way the analysis has been done, and correct me if I'm wrong. The focus has been on the LMAD 6 area, but I'm not certain about that. About Melissa Cretchent.
New person in the mix.
Melissa Cretchent is our staff senior analyst. I'm sorry, no, manager. She was just promoted to manager.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Just right now, sorry.
Mayor, members of the council, so I put together the maintenance component along with Heidi and her team. So when it comes to the maintenance component, it's specific to that development. So the different categories that are included in the maintenance component is landscaping, graffiti, roads, parks, drainage, and traffic signals. So in comparison, right now, developments are asked to annex into a landscape maintenance assessment district citywide number 6 and DFAD 1 and SLAD. So SLAD is remaining, so we're not changing the street lighting assessment district. Instead, the CFD for new development would be in lieu of LMAD 6 or DFAD 1, or if there's a MAD, a maintenance assessment district. So Las Haciendas is a maintenance assessment district. This CFD would take place of those. So right now, we couldn't send a crew if it's being serviced by the CFD to Brentwood, right? That's a separate LMAD. We couldn't use the staff and services in that area. Public safety is a different, that would be citywide.
I get that. Actually, I'm going to talk with you more after the meeting on that, Mr. Metzler. That wasn't exactly my question, but I wanted to move on to something more important with regard to the exemption on affordable housing, if I could. So, I mean, I understand it. I think it's great, and this might be because I have more schooling to be had on this. At what point does affordable housing fall out of that category? I mean, is it in perpetuity? Like if it's originally built by a developer as affordable housing, does it always stay that way so that then through buys and sales of a particular home or groups of homes?
Your time is up.
Go ahead and finish that question.
Thank you. Or groups of homes, whoever the 10th owner down the road continues to get an exemption?
I'm sorry, Heidi, go ahead.
Okay, so in the rate and method of apportionment, which is the governing document, we'll have definitions of affordable housing being low or very low income housing. And if something at the city would trigger that, that designation or land use to change, then the rate and method of apportionment would be reallocated to that property and they would pay the special tax.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Councilwoman Gomez.
So I have a couple of clarification ideas that I'd like to see if you can clarify. There's been various terms in terms of percentages that have been thrown out, like 5%, CIP, or 2% or higher. And then the combination is of both the O&M and the public safety that would be burdened to be able to, for the cost to be less or to help pay for whatever services. In the context of this conversation, how do those percentages fit? I hear too many terms being thrown with the percentages as inflators to help, but I don't see which ones are actually helping or making the escalation with 5% being thrown in there.
So there are allowances provided, and those effectively are frameworks that we, when we administer the CFD on the annual basis, a determination will be made given those allowances. And so my understanding of the process, and Heidi can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's an annual attestation or certification process that has to be done before August, I think, of every year, where we actually have to analyze, or analyzing of the costs have to be made before recertifying of the tax rolls, basically, with the county tax collector's office.
Right, so on an annual basis, we will evaluate the budget for public safety and the budget for operations and maintenance. We will escalate the special tax. So for public safety, we use 5% or CPI because the escalation for public safety services is generally higher than that for maintenance and operations. For operations and maintenance, we escalate by 2% or CPI, and CPI is Consumer Price Index. It's just an industry standard for an escalator on a special tax. So we take the greater of those for each of the special taxes and we apply that to the maximum special tax. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what we collect on an annual basis. We'll do a budget. And if we don't need to collect the maximum special tax, we can always enroll a special tax that is lesser, but you cannot enroll a special tax that is greater than the maximum special tax. So we include those escalators to provide coverage to ensure that on an annual basis, we're able to keep up with inflation for providing those services.
Thank you. And then as a hypothetical, if there's an old homeowner that sells his home, his or her home is basically given to the child, which is inherited, but they don't do the appropriate paperwork. Would that trigger a reassessment? Then this home, if it were in that qualifying CFD annexation, would now have to be a part of that, the context of we're having a discussion?
Your time is up.
So only if the home were a new home sold within the CFD that was already in the boundaries of the CFD would the special taxes be paid by that homeowner. So any existing homes that are not within the CFD would not be subject to annexation into the CFD from a home sale or transfer.
Now it's my turn. Let's really muddy the waters. Mr. Metzler, I did notice on here it says non-residential. We do mean businesses, correct?
There is a component for new commercial development as well.
Does SCLA stand out by itself, or they would be a part of this?
The new development and how we would influence any new development, including development in SCLA, they would be influenced to annex in through the Planning Commission process. So among the whole laundry list of conditions of approval that we typically assign to a development, one of the conditions will be that thou shall mitigate their long-term economic impacts. And effectively, this CFD becomes the answer to the development and how they can mitigate their long-term economic impacts.
What triggers a CFD for a remodel of a building, i.e. Sprouts?
I don't believe that would qualify.
Yeah, generally speaking, a remodel wouldn't trigger a CFD annexation. It'd have to be some kind of recordation of a new map, something that gives you conditions of approval.
Okay. When we build a new fire department home, a firehouse, I don't know what you call it, do we get that from the developer, or we go out and we buy land for a new fire home?
It's happened both ways. We've had over the course of time, we've had property donated, but we have a recurring collection mechanism built into our development impact fees that can be used effectively. That's the mitigation for development to pay for some of the capital associated with, building a fire station. So we do have a collection mechanism there. In the past, we've had experience where we've had a developer build a station, we've had developer donate land. However, I think what we would likely do next is first determine, and that's why we're doing the standard of cover, what does our eventual service model need to look like going forward, and then pursue the acquisition and construction in a location that fits that. If we can't rely on development impact fees and it's a big enough project, it might necessitate, donation of land. I mean, there's a whole bunch of options, but at this, it's too early to determine that right now.
So just because the housing tract is paying CFD and it just happens to be there's 2,000 homes going in and they could get a new fire station, it's not just because of the CFD, it's because of the amount of residents who now live on that side or this side of Bear Valley Road.
And I would say getting a new fire station has nothing to do with the CFD, because the CFD is dealing with the ongoing O&M, the human cost associated with the service. The capital cost, the actual station construction, has more to do with the demand from the development and our collection of, say, development impact fees over time to pay for that station.
Okay. Mrs. Mel, brought up public service and maintenance. So the roads now in new homes are going to be slurried every 7 years?
I wish that were the case. I mean, this is not going to be the answer. Certainly not on day one. But it certainly, again, helps provide for an offset to the increased demand for, say, that type of service. The fundamental problem that we have right now is we have 50-year-old streets in existing residential tracts that's competing for the same pot of money that funds reconstruction of Bear Valley Road, for example.
What would trigger a CFD, i.e., I don't live there, but say I lived in Brentwood, somebody to go out and get a certain amount of signatures to go to a CFD? Or how would that work to get an older neighborhood in a CFD? And that would kick them out of LMADS, correct?
Well, it depends on a lot. I think what you're talking about, it very well could be that, this type of CFD is not really the right answer. It may be instead that they're just looking for a benefit assessment. There likely are other similar types of mechanisms that can fund the need, because I think what you're talking about, whether it's LMADS, we keep going back to LMADS because we have some problems in a few of them. This is not going to address the ones that we have problems in. It can't. The resolving of the problems from the LMADS that have issues have to be resolved by those that are in the LMADS themselves. And so it would be some type of additional, either a consent to the change in the formation documents for those LMADs, or perhaps some other type of mechanism where they annex into, say, an existing well-performing LMAD and detaching from the district that they do have. I mean, it all depends on what the need is.
Okay. I know we addressed the fire department and the police station also with the CFD, because like you said, a deputy's not going to be at the corner just because they're paying for it, but it can go into the police station fund.
It would be used to offset basically the cost of the contract.
Okay. Well, believe it or not, I'm done. This item requires no action. So thank you very much. Good presentation. Thank you, Ms. Mel.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Metzler, thank you very much. I'm sure this isn't the end of it. We're going to move on to item 14. Approval of agreement with David Evans and Associates, Inc. for professional services and data collection. Mr. Metzler, would you kindly introduce this item?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. This item involves a contract for professional services, particularly civil engineering services, with David Evans and Associates, a firm that we've worked with, a fairly local firm. They used to be based in Victorville. They're now based in Apple Valley. and very knowledgeable about our community. We've been working with them for some time. This particular item is a contract, one-year contract with 4 additional one-year extensions, basically to have them serve some additional work, work that's driven more so based upon the demand of developers when they're going through the development process. And so the primary scope of work that's contemplated in this contract is a sewer feasibility analysis. And so with that, this item would extend those services, would extend a contract for those services to be performed on an as-need basis. Also, some additional work through a public, PO, so as to support some other associated work with the Safe Routes to School project. So anyhow, this project's been authored by your city engineer, Mr. Freddie Bonilla. He's available for any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you very much, sir. Madam Clerk, would you please read the recommendation?
That the Honorable City Council approve a consultant professional services provider agreement with David Evans and Associates, Inc. in the amount not to exceed $100,000 for performing sewer feasibility studies and general sewer assistance, and approve a purchase order for data collection in an amount not to exceed $5,600 for conducting after-project completion counts for the 2019 Safe Routes to School project.
Thank you. This time we'll do technical questions from the council. Councilwoman Gomez?
What are the specific advantages of continuing with David Evans and Associates compared to potentially switching to a new provider?
I think the easiest way to answer that is to say that there is less learning curve working with a firm that is very familiar with our community, our issues, and our existing system.
What metrics or KPIs, key performance indicators, are used to evaluate their performance, and how have they scored on these metrics during the previous term?
I don't know because we don't use those metrics. They're not necessary for a professional service like this.
And how will the costs of this agreement be accommodated within the city's budget, and what financial adjustments or allocations will be necessary?
So the fiscal impact identifies that there's no fiscal impact resulting from this item, and that has more to do with the fact that these type of services are paid for by development when development goes through the planning process. We effectively require development to pay for the costs associated with doing the sewer feasibility analysis, and effectively what that analysis is to determine is whether or not the existing sewer system can accommodate what's being proposed by development.
Are there any anticipated increases in costs for these services in the near future? And how does the city plan to manage these increases?
All of that would be spelled out in the contract, and effectively the way this works is if there is an increase in the cost of the service, we effectively pass 100% of that on to the developer.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Jones?
I have none, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Irving?
I do have a question. You must have been inside my head, Councilmember Gomez. I just, as I was reading the backup material for this particular item, I did wonder how are, when it comes to procurement in Victorville, like you just said, we don't use a particular framework or a rubric. How do we decide who, or how do we decide or determine who gets a contract?
Well, so in this particular case, of course, there was an RFP process done some time ago. And so before we actually began working with David Evans and Associates, we did go through that process. However, we've relied on their performance over time for a number of different projects to actually influence our desire to continue working with them on this next project.
But we, as a city, we don't utilize a particular rubric, or, it's not certain criteria is weighted. Do we do that?
For something like this, not necessarily. It's more so based upon the quality of the service and does the service that they provide satisfy and meet our expectations.
Okay, for this one, but I guess what I'm thinking about is professional services. This is an amendment. We've already had an ongoing relationship. So say, for instance, it's a new provider. We don't?
For the same type of service?
Whatever, is there a general rubric that we utilize when it comes to procurement?
So when it comes to procurement, you're gonna have to help me understand the question.
When we decide who's going to get a contract for professional services, how do we make that determination who is awarded the professional service? I'm sure we do a needs assessment, so it's driven by need.
We do that, and that's all delineated in the actual RFP process when we go through an RFP process for the service.
Okay, I probably need to have another conversation with you outside of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
No, I don't have any questions.
Thank you. I have none.
I'll have comments.
Okay, I'll invite a motion for this item.
Madam Mayor, I move that we adopt staff's recommendation.
Second.
I have a first by Councilmember Jones, a second by Councilmember Irving. Councilmember Jones, comment?
None, thank you.
Councilmember Harriman?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem.
So we're using these guys because they're the ones that have been doing the work in the past, and there's, like you said, they've already gone through the learning curve, correct?
That's correct. I mean, we're talking about civil engineering. We're talking about an understanding of an actual system that has flows, has hydraulics. There's a system, there's a network of the system to understand. And so, yes, there's a tremendous amount, especially when it comes to the civil engineering side. And when you work with a firm over a course of time and they become more and more familiar with it, it's like having a firm that's a part of your institutional knowledge. And certainly that factors into our consideration as to whether or not we want to continue working with them. If it so happened that we believed it was necessary to find a different firm for whatever reason, perhaps we weren't pleased with the responsiveness, let's say, to our requests or the timeliness to the performance of the service, we would factor in, of course, in the decision to perhaps solicit and do a new RFP or even RFQ, depending upon the nature of the work. We would factor in, the loss of that institutional knowledge and the additional costs that likely would have to be incurred to help a new firm get up to speed with the system dynamics.
All right, then my final question, this is the way I think it should.
Councilmember Harriman, these are comments.
That's what I was
Question?
gonna be a comment. I'm agreeing. I prefer we do it this way with a contractor that's got a lot of experience in the city already.
Councilwoman Irving, any comments?
Yes, I don't want it, I want to clarify, and I'm going to make it clear. I am happy that we are working with this particular professional service provider for this particular project. My question was general. I was simply wanting to know, do we have a particular framework that we utilize or a particular rubric? I'm aware of at least two. I don't know if there are contracts or but professional service providers that are engaging and providing services that I have not seen an RFQ. I haven't seen. So come across the council. So I wanted to know, this was a general question because we were talking about awarding a contract to a professional provider. So please, I don't of course, I want the most experienced people working on our projects. I was asking a general question and asking for clarification, and that is why I said that perhaps this conversation should be held outside of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gomez?
Yes, supposedly if there's no framework for a rubric, I could proceed to say that perhaps if there's an agreement or a consultation or anything that brings contractually both parties to the table, I could see to a certain respect that the recitals, the indemnification, all the clauses within that contract could, to a degree, be seen as a generic type of rubric if we wanted to talk about standardizing something, and I think the contract may to a degree do that. But in an academic realm, thinking about a rubric, it may be lacking something more specific, which is perhaps some of the reasons why these questions get asked in these types of meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, will you kindly take the vote?
Councilmember Gomez,
Aye.
Councilmember Irving,
Yes.
Councilmember Jones, Mayor Pro Tem Harriman,
Yes.
Mayor Becerra.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
We've now taken action to approve staff's recommendation as presented on the agenda. Item 15, establishing a four-way stop control for the intersection of Bear Valley Road and Monte Vista Road. Mr. Metzger, would you kindly introduce this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. This item is being brought forward resulting from a complaint-based investigation that was conducted by staff for the intersection of Monte Vista and Bear Valley Road. It was a traffic-related complaint, and there was a concern about the activity, the amount of traffic flowing through that four-way stop. And so resulting from staff having responded to that complaint, we actually conducted an investigation. Basically, we analyzed the intersection and conducted an evaluation of the trip counts flowing through that intersection. Among others that are standardly required to determine changes in roadway conditions. And so we were able to identify that that intersection actually meets warrants for a traffic signal. And so just because it meets warrants for a traffic signal, especially because we don't have the funds to actually build a traffic signal, it at least allows us for the opportunity to start planning for the installation of a traffic signal at that particular intersection. But it does allow for us to change roadway conditions by installing a four-way stop control at that intersection. No cost is expected to be incurred by the city as the County of San Bernardino has agreed to take on that work as we own half the intersection. So with that, this would actually authorize moving forward with the changing of the dynamic in that intersection. The author on this item is your city engineer, Mr. Freddie Bonilla, and he's available for any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, would you please read the recommendation?
That the Honorable City Council adopt Resolution Number 24-031, establishing a four-way stop control for the intersection of Bear Valley Road and Monte Vista Road.
Thank you. This time we'll take technical questions from the council members. Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
Yes, I'm probably going to get in trouble when I ask this because it's a little off, but would a CFD pay for this down the line?
God.
For the actual installation of the
Traffic signal.
So for the traffic signal, likely not. Typically how we've paid for traffic signal, it's been either Measure I or grants that we get through the state. And so that would be the first look for funding. And certainly we do pay for a large component of the O&M of the traffic signal through our street lighting assessment district. So likely not to be borne by a CFD.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Jones?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So it it looks like that a traffic signal is warranted there, but we're going to do the stop signs as sort of a stopgap measure.
That's an interim measure, correct, until you have the ability to fund for the construction of a signal.
Oh, okay. And then, so I'm just wondering, I mean, I just think about liability. So if we know that a traffic light has to be there for the safety of our residents, and yet we're doing a four-way stop, what happens if someone's injured at the four-way stop?
My understanding is that the four-way stop satisfies the requirements to control the intersection. I'm going to ask Freddie Bonilla to address that concern, as I know it's not new to us.
Thank you, Mr. Metzger. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. So this is an interim measure to be able to control the intersection. It was a result of a resident complaint, basically southbound traffic. When you get to Bear Valley Road, they have to yield to east-west traffic. And so we went out, we determined it, we did some traffic counts, and we determined that a signal is warranted. We have already, we've been very successful with the HSIP grant applications. Cycle 12 is coming up fairly soon. So we are already looking at grant opportunities to be able to install this. Having said all of that, the always stop measure is one of multiple improvements that are coming to this intersection. Right now, we have CA Rasmussen under contract for the Bear Valley Road street improvement project. As part of that contract, they will be putting in a dedicated right turn pocket to help alleviate some of those concerns. But the always stop sign will allow for southbound traffic to safely make either a left onto Bear Valley Road or a right onto Bear Valley Road. And we foresee this as an interim measure. And just to give you an example, the last time that this council acted on a similar measure was on June 1st of 2021. And that was as a result of the new signal that was just recently constructed at Village and Tawny Ridge. And so you can imagine that having, if this body approves this motion today, we will pursue those grant applications that I mentioned earlier and hopefully bring that project to fruition in the next year or two.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mestre. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilwoman Gomez?
What specific data or incidents at the intersection of Bear Valley Road and Monte Vista justify the immediate installation of a four-way stop as an interim measure rather than waiting for the construction of a traffic signal?
The traffic volumes?
And what are the projected timeframes and costs associated with implementing the four-way stop now versus waiting for the installation of the traffic signal?
The cost of the stop sign are minimal. We have them in stock, and we'll be coordinating with the County of San Bernardino for them to pay for their share.
And how will the installation of the four-way stop affect local businesses and residential access in the area?
There are no local businesses in the area. You have undeveloped land there. I mean, if I got lucky and a development came in at that corner, we would actually condition them for the signal, given that we know that the need is there. And then as far as access to our residents, it's actually going to increase access. It's going to make it safer for them to get in and out of their communities on Monte Vista.
And what legal standards or criteria does the city use to determine the term necessity of traffic control measures like the proposed four-way stop?
The Manual Uniform Traffic Control Devices, the CAMUTCD.
And what safety evaluations have been conducted regarding the proposed four-way stop, and what findings support the installation as the most effective interim solution?
So after we received the resident complaint, we did a full warrant analysis for the signals. And then we also did a stop sign analysis. And given that the signal warrants are significantly higher, it was almost a given that the stop sign would be warranted.
Thank you. No further question.
Thank you. Councilwoman Irving?
Well, thank you, Mr. Bernier. You kind of answered my question. So the analysis of traffic study for a traffic light is a little different than what's required for a four-way stop. Is that correct?
Well, the want to correct just the intersection right now functions like a T intersection. There is no fourth approach from the south. It's currently undeveloped right now. And it is stop controlled for southbound traffic on Monte Vista. It's just not controlled. You have free flow access on Bear Valley Road. So the proposed improvement would actually allow for access to Monte Vista and from Monte Vista to Bear Valley Road.
The reason that I'm asking you to clarify this is because this is not my area of expertise, but often people call me with complaints demanding that they want a traffic signal. Right now, the latest one is on Mojave and Diamond. So, I said, well, we need to have a traffic study. But it sounds as if there might be an opportunity, perhaps, if a complaint triggers an investigation and an analysis or evaluation, perhaps there's an opportunity for us to take a look at that particular intersection, and maybe a four-way stop might be warranted. I don't know, but at least I can give them another response outside of, we need a traffic study. Is that correct?
Typically, that is the best correct answer, is to perform a traffic signal warrant analysis. We can do one of two things. If it's a developed area or an undeveloped area, we'll take it on as city staff. We have the capability to be able to do that study. We do update our counts annually. However, when you mention Mojave and Diamond, we've got some upcoming developments that are going through the entitlement process right now. And rest assured, a traffic study will be required for all those big box developments. And that's one of the intersections we'll be analyzing in the near future.
Okay, well, I'm gonna have the resident call you tomorrow. Thank you. I don't have any further questions or anything.
Thank you. Councilmember Harriman, you said you had another question?
So is this, do you think this is going to require a blinking light that says stop ahead, since nobody's used to the stopping right there? Maybe a solar power, do those come solar powered?
We have looked at that option. Those are relatively cost effective. They're about $1,000 for the solar powered one. Most certainly, it's not a well-lit intersection. There is no street lighting at that intersection. So we want to make sure that it's safe. So we'll be looking at that should the council give us authority to.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor, I do have one additional question.
Sure, go ahead.
Mr. Metzler, so if a community member expresses concern over an area, it doesn't mean that we've never done anything, right? There have been times when we've received a number of complaints and we've already done the analysis. True?
Yes, generally any complaint that we receive, we go out and investigate. The most recent one that I can remember, and in fact, coming to this council and we investigated the very next day, was at Amargosa and Eucalyptus. And so, no, we respond to those complaints seriously. As an example, that particular intersection, as we evaluated it, didn't meet warrants, and it's all going to come down to whether or not it meets warrants. And once it does, then that's the notice that we have to then begin the process of determining the appropriate way to control the intersection.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Gomez, do you have another question?
No.
Good to go. Okay, my turn. Wait. Freddie, in working with the MUTCD book, this book actually tells us what we can do, how far we can go, and things like that. This keeps us from getting sued if someone gets hurt, correct?
Yes.
And we follow this thing to the T of limits and everything like that.
Absolutely.
That's why. And that's why it's written for the cities to be covered under this, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And by the way, four-way stops are way better than signals, because now they're picking up speed and they're hitting again 80 miles an hour when they come to El Camino. So stops are better. Thank you very much, sir. At this time, I'll invite a motion for this item.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I move that the council take action in accordance with the recommendations set forth on the agenda.
Second.
That's okay. I'll go with them.
Ladies first.
There we go. I have a first by Councilmember Jones, a second by Councilmember Irvins. Councilmember Jones, do you have any comments?
I do. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I certainly want to thank our resident who expressed care and concern over this intersection. And because of his or her effort, our community is going to be safer. Hats off to that community member.
Thank you. Councilmember Irvin?
I'd like to echo Councilmember Jones's sentiments. Thank you.
Councilmember Harriman?
I have none.
Councilmember Gomez?
No, thank you.
Freddie, good luck. Your phone's gonna start ringing tomorrow. Everybody's gonna want to stop sign. Madam Clerk, will you please take the vote?
Councilmember Gomez.
Aye.
Councilmember Irving.
Yes.
Councilmember Jones.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman.
Yes.
Mayor Becerra.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
We've now taken action to approve staff's recommendation as presented on the agenda. Item 16, Bear Valley Road Overhead BNSF Railroad Project Closeout. Mr. Metzger, would you please kindly introduce this item?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. This item involves the final reconciliation and the actual closeout of monies determined necessary to close out the project. And so with that, there is a request for appropriation of funds, and that would effectively satisfy and basically represent the end of the project. This item has been authored by your city engineer, Mr. Brian Gangler, and Brian Gangler. Wow. Mr. Freddie Bonilla, and he's available for any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, please read the recommendation.
That the Honorable City Council take the following actions related to the Bear Valley Road Overhead at BNSF Railroad Project. Adopt Resolution Number 24-032 to amend the fiscal year 2023-24 budget to reflect an additional appropriation of $828,722.24 from Fund 352 and additional expenses in the amount of $828,722.24 from Fund 352. Approve contract change orders number 2, 3, and 4 to Riverside Construction Company, Inc. in the amount not to exceed $678,722.24. And approve amendment number 2 to the consultant professional services provider agreement for construction management services with Parsons Transportation Group, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $150,000.
Thank you. At this time, we'll do technical questions from our council members, starting with Councilmember Jones.
None, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Irving.
I don't have any questions. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Gomez.
Yes, what financial safeguards are in place to ensure that the increase in compensation from 125,000 to 175,000 is justified and it's not wasteful for our tax-paying dollars? And can you provide a specific example or a mechanism that presents and prevents unnecessary expenditures?
Yeah, the process that we go through is that we literally rely on our staff, our amazingly talented staff, to review every document submitted, to make sure that every document submitted it actually is justified in terms of change against the original design, and then from there determinations made to make the payment if it's justified.
And how does the city ensure that the work carried out under this contract adheres to ministerial standards?
Can you restate the question, please?
Yes. Again, how does the city ensure that the work that's carried out under the contract adheres to any administrative, so how is it standardized and how does it follow the compliance, whatever compliance that we have to comply as a standard, whether it's annually or every time it comes up?
We effectively rely on our comparison of all of the design documents, all of the bid documents. We read them, we understand them, we interpret them. We also then receive and review all documents for payment submitted and basically do an assessment to determine if everything's being done consistent with contractor plans.
And what oversight mechanisms are in place to monitor the quality and the efficiency of that work? Is it the same? I know we rely on auditing every.
The answer is yes.
Can the city manager or the attorney elaborate more on the transparency measures in place that allow for the public to understand and review the use of funds for this amendment?
No.
That was my last question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Harriman.
I have none.
I have none. At this time, I'll invite a motion for this item. I'll move to to approve staff's recommendation.
Second.
The first by Mayor Becerra, second by Councilmember Harriman. I have no question or no comments. Councilmember Harriman?
Keith, all work gets done and inspected by state, county, federal, city inspectors, does it not?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jones?
None, thank you.
Councilmember Irving?
No comments.
Councilmember Gomez?
Questions of this magnitude are always important. We understand that there's errors and omissions when we do such services, and humans make errors. So my questions were in line. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, will you take the vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Irving,
Yes.
Councilmember Jones,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman,
Yes.
Mayor Becerra.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
We've now taken action to approve staff's recommendation as presented on the agenda. This time, we're going to take a 5-minute recess, 8:10. Thank you. There we go. Okay, we're gonna go on to item 17. Consideration of resolution number BWD 24-002 and BWD 24-003. Resolution of the Board of Directors of the Victorville Water District initiating proceeds to fix, levy, collect standby charges for Water Improvement District Number 1, WID 1, and for Water Improvement District Number 2, WID 2, for fiscal year 2024-2025. Mr. Metzler, would you introduce this item, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. The Victorville Water District was created after annexing into our jurisdiction, our jurisdictional control, the former Victorville Water District and the former, the former Victor Valley Water District and then the former Baldy Mesa Water District. And as a part of taking on those two districts and consolidating them into the Victorville Water District, the LAFCO process required us to still recognize the two districts separately from an accounting perspective, in large part because we had benefit assessments that were separate and independent to those districts. And so in the case of what we refer to as WID 1, that's the former Victor Valley Water District boundary, they actually had a benefit assessment assessed against vacant properties within the district dating back to 1975. And that benefit assessment effectively has been renewed annually since. In fact, this item before you tonight is something that we've routinely undertaken on an annual basis around this time of the year to basically renew, to make sure that the collection is in place for the next fiscal year. WID 2 also had a benefit assessment dating back to 1969. And in that particular case, they've got a benefit assessment in place that affects all properties in the former Baldy Mesa boundary. And effectively, that assessment is used to secure an actual bond that was issued for infrastructure improvements in that district. And so this item particularly is just renewing those assessments in those two particular areas. The WID 1 area is approximately $10 an acre for vacant property. They're within 660 feet of a public water system or a public main. And then WID 2 is effectively $15 per acre for all vacant properties to support, again, those bonds that were issued in WID 2. So with that, this item has been authored by your Director of Public Works and Water, Mr. Doug Matthews. He's available for any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, would you please read the recommendation?
That the Honorable Victorville Water District Board of Directors approve resolution number VWD 24-002, authorizing the Victorville Water District to initiate proceedings to fix, levy, and collect standby charges for Water Improvement District 1 for fiscal year 2024-2025. Approve resolution number VWD 24-003, authorizing the Victorville Water District to initiate proceedings to fix, levy, and collect standby charges for Water Improvement District 2 for fiscal year 2024-2025, and set May 21, 2024 as the date for the public hearing for the purpose of hearing arguments for and against determinations to fix, levy, and collect water standby charges as set forth in the aforementioned resolutions.
Thank you. At this time, we'll take questions from the council. Councilmember Irving?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Jones?
None. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
I have none.
Councilmember Gomez?
In regards to resolutions number VWD 24-002 and VWD 24-003, what measures or provisions are currently in place within these resolutions to ensure that low-income households are not disproportionately impacted by the annual standby charges, particularly those in the water improvement districts 1 and 2? Whether it's a city council or the city, would you be able to consider implementing a sliding scale program for standby charges based on income levels to aid low-income residents, ensuring that water costs remain affordable?
No.
For all socioeconomic segments within the district?
No, this item has nothing to do with that, or this item has no ability to alter the collection mechanism or the purpose for the collection mechanism.
And what specific outreach or educational efforts can or have been made to inform residents especially those individuals from low-income backgrounds, about potential subsidies, if that is the case, or any types of financial assistance programs like ARPA, if anything were to be created or available to help them offset the costs associated with the new standby charges? I know they've been implemented for years, but it doesn't mean that that's not something that's possible. We have an amenable council in the future.
Relating to this specific item, nothing.
Thank you. That was my last question.
Mr. Wessler, I have a question. In reading this, WID 1 and WID 2, these are for vacant properties, correct?
Slightly different between the two districts. They are for vacant properties. In WID 1, only vacant properties within 660 feet of an actual water main system. In the case of WID 2, it's all vacant properties.
So if I'm low income and I own property, I need to sell my property so I can get money to get off low income, correct?
I'm sorry, can you restate that again?
If I'm low income and I own a property, sell the property and you no longer will be a low income. I have no further questions. At this time, I'll invite a motion for this item. I motion that we approve staff's recommendation.
Second.
I have no comments on this. Councilmember Harriman?
None.
Councilmember Jones?
And thank you.
Councilmember Irving?
Did you say my name?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you call me Ernest?
I did.
It's Irving. Thank you, and I don't have any comments. Thank you.
I apologize.
No worries.
Irving.
No, Irving, just one. Just one.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Councilmember Gomez?
Absolutely. The constituency that I represent comes from all pockets and all types of categorization. So I'll never exclude marginalized and individuals who would have the potentiality of having a city council who would be amenable a 3-2 vote or anything higher. That's why my questions came into play. So I appreciate the ears that were open for those that wanted and those that didn't. It is what it is. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, will you take the vote?
Councilmember Gomez,
Hi.
Councilmember Irving,
Yes.
Councilmember Jones,
Hi.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman,
Yes.
Mayor Becerra.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
We've now taken action to approve staff's recommendation as presented on the agenda. Item number 18, approve Amendment 3 to the General Service Provider Standard Agreement for Qualified Fence Contract, Project CC 23-028. Mr. Metzler, would you kindly introduce this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. This item effectively involves a contract for standby services relating to the fixing of fences, most notably out at the Southern California Logistics Airport. And the reason why this item is on the agenda is under this contract. It's approaching the exceedance of the city manager's purchasing authority. And so with that, to help provide for flexibility to get us through the fiscal year, not knowing if there's any accidents, vehicles driving through fences, can't predict that. We do want to have the ability to respond as quickly as possible. And so with that, that's effectively the reason this item is before you. The item has been authored by your airport director, Mr. Eric Ray. He's here in attendance and available for any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please read the recommendation?
That the Southern California Logistics Airport Authority Board of Directors approve Amendment 3 to the General Services Provider Standard Agreement to Danton Enterprises, Inc., DBA All-American Fence Erectors for Qualified Fence Contractor, Project CC 23-028, increasing the total not to exceed compensation by $50,000 to $175,000.
Thank you. This time we'll do technical questions from the council members. Councilmember Irving, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mayor Becerra. I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jones?
None, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
I have none.
Thank you. Councilmember Gomez?
Yes, for item 18, what lessons has the airport director and the team learned from the history of the fence repairs at the Southern California Logistics Airports that informed the current need for securing additional funds for fencing?
I think the lessons learned are that we have some driving behaviors that are very poor, because many of the reasons for having to fix the fence are because vehicles are driving in such a way that causes them to leave the road. That combined with the fact that we believe another lesson learned is the sooner we can accommodate the expansion of industrial development out at SCLA, it'll actually reduce the need for that fencing, particularly the screening components that sit on the fencing, because effectively the development will tear down the old housing that we're trying to screen from public view.
Given the recurring incidents and the ongoing requirements for fence maintenance, can the city detail the proactive steps that are being taken to ensure that the budget for future fencing needs is sufficient and the dollars are used efficiently?
Well, I think effectively that's why we're bringing this item forward. We do use the budgeting process. We use past practice, past history. We monitor on a monthly basis. And because we've experienced an unusual experience this year with a higher volume of need for the service, that's why we're bringing this item to you.
And considering the strategic importance of fencing for airport security and the potential for unforeseeable costs, what safeguards are in place to ensure that the spending on fence repairs and maintenance does not exceed the allocated budget and that it is executed without wasteful expenditures?
So we do have a fairly robust budgeting and accounting software that actually includes controls. So say, for example, when we actually adopt a budget and there's actually a number put into a line item expense, there are actually controls, there are actually bells that actually advise us that we're either approaching our budgeted expense allowance. And so when we see that, it's the responsibility of staff to do exactly what they're doing in an item like this tonight, is bring it back before this council to seek additional appropriation if determined that the additional services are necessary.
Thank you. That was no further questions.
I have none. I'll invite a motion for this item.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I move that the SCLAA Board of Directors take action in accordance with the recommendations set forth on the agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
I have a first by Councilmember Jones, a second by Mayor Pro Tem Harriman. At this time, I'll take comments on the motion. Councilmember Jones?
None, thank you.
Councilmember Harriman?
None.
Councilmember Irvine?
I don't have any comments, thank you.
Councilmember Gomez?
No, thank you.
I have none. Madam Clerk, will you take the vote?
Councilmember Gomez.
Aye.
Councilmember Irving.
Yes.
Councilmember Jones.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman.
Yes.
Mayor Becerra.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We've now taken action to approve staff's recommendation as presented on the agenda. Item 19, award of construction agreement with Shade Structures, Inc., DBA USA, Shade and Fabric Structures for the Brentwood Shade Structure Purchase and Installation Project ESC 24-094, CMAS contract number 4-22-11-1011. Mr. Metzler, would you kindly introduce this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. This item involves the purchase of the furnishing, delivery, and installation of 3 fabric shade structures at Brentwood Park. And this item is effectively funded using a combination of funds, grant funds, general fund, and Measure P funds. We've actually relied on a cooperative purchasing arrangement to actually secure this contractor or this provider, which is actually provided for in accordance with our municipal code. So with that, the item is authored by your Director of Community Services, Ms. Donna Meester. She's available here in attendance and available for any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, could you please read the recommendation?
That the Honorable City Council approve a construction agreement in the amount not to exceed $151,603.54 with Shade Structures, Inc., DBA USA Shade and Fabric Structures for the Brentwood Shade Structure Purchase and Installation Projects ESC 24-094.
Thank you, ma'am. This time we'll do technical questions from council members, starting with Councilmember Gomez.
What are the expected lifetimes of the shade structures and the fabrics proposed for the installation at Brentwood Park? And how do these compare to other materials or designs that were considered during the selection process?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. I'm going to ask Ms. Donna Meester to approach and address the useful life of the product.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm checking my notes. There is a guarantee, and I believe it's a 20-year warranty on this, but I would have to research that to bring back a definite answer on that.
The next question is, can you detail the warranty terms for the shade structures and fabrics? And what did these warranties cover, and what might the potential costs outside of the warranty be covered? Or what would the warranty coverage be?
I'm reading through the staff report because Ms. Meester answered your question in the previous question, which is we didn't know right away. So now we're reading the staff report. I think there's some warranty provisions in the contract. I'm actually looking at page 474. Maybe you'll read with me because I think it's included in there.
If I may, there is a paragraph. These limited warranties are void if, and there's a list of 3 points that would void the warranty. And then the next paragraph, there are limited warranty that does not cover defects or damages caused by, and there are 4 points.
Thank you.
On page, let's see, I'm seeing something that speaks to a 10-year limited manufacturer warranty. So on page 4, oh gosh, what is this? I don't know why I'm not numbered here. 476, it looks like. Item 15, bullet number 4, bullet point 4. All fabrics carry a 10-year limited manufacturer's warranty against failure from significant fading, deterioration, breakdown, outdoor heat, cold, or discoloration.
And the next question is, how do the proposed shade structures withstand environmental stressors such as high winds, UV exposure, and frequent usage? Have they been tested under similar conditions to those that would be expected at Brentwood?
They have.
I'm sorry?
They have been tested.
Thank you. The next question and final question is, what contingency measures are in place should the shade structures fail prematurely or not meet performance expectations post-installation?
Well, we do daily inspections at our parks, taking note of all conditions, and so this would just be another part of our routine inspection exercise. And so we document conditions, and to the extent there's a condition documented that seems to fit a warranty element here where we identify perhaps what we believe is a failure, then we'll contact the manufacturer and try to pursue some kind of warranty claim.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Irving?
I don't have any questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Harriman?
I have none.
Councilmember Jones?
None, thank you.
And I have none. At this time, I'll invite a motion for this item. Council, I motion we accept staff's recommendation and approve items on the agenda.
Second.
I have no comments. Councilmember Harriman?
This is the same, these last a long time. I noticed we're putting them over the vacuum areas on the new car wash. So these should perform well.
Thank you. Councilmember Jones?
None, thank you.
Councilmember Irving?
No comments, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gomez?
Yes, the questions that I pose is because if I were making this purchase, I would want to know these items. So these are very important for me and my community members who decide when they make a purchase, they want to know certain things. So that's why those questions were posed. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, will you take the vote, please?
Councilmember Gomez,
Aye.
Councilmember Irving,
Yes.
Councilmember Jones,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman,
Yes.
Mayor Becerra.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Now taking action to approve staff's recommendation as presented on the agenda. Item number 20, discussion and possible action to expand the purchasing rules for local vendor preference to high district companies as long as Victorville companies are not participating. Mayor Pro Tem Harriman, would you like to introduce the item since you requested it?
Yes, so, after discussing this with, the city manager, I understand, we're unable to do that, but maybe, our city attorney can explain that, in more detail and a more educational aspect.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Yes, we have looked at the issue. The city does have a vendor preference right now for goods and services where you do have a 3% ability to do a local preference for vendors for goods and items. Expanding that to contracts is significantly more difficult. While a few cities have done it, it really comes down to a risk-benefit analysis as to whether or not you want to establish a local bidder preference. Certainly, you could do it if you wanted to. However, if you did it, it has to be limited to what is deemed to be a municipal affair, and it would have to be limited to contracts that are under $60,000. In addition, it would have to be able to withstand possible challenges from bidders based on federal law, which would include the Code of Federal Regulations, the Privileges and Immunities Clause, the Commerce Clause, and the Equal Protection Clause, all of the U.S. Constitution. So if you were to do it, there are all kinds of grounds to challenge it, and all of these federal challenges have been used by the courts to basically challenge bidder preferences. If the city did want it to do it, it would have to do a significant rewrite of the municipal code because the municipal code has adopted the Uniform Public Construction Cost Accounting Act, and that is contained actually in the California Public Contracts Code. So the Contracts Code in California does not allow bidding preferences, so another hurdle to overcome. If we look to the city's charter, which is what would allow us to do it, we would have to basically determine these are absolute municipal affairs. And what is a municipal affair has now been blurred by the state. Clearly, it would have to be a project that had no state funds, no federal funds, and the courts and the Attorney General have now indicated that what constitutes a municipal affair is a fluid concept that changes as local issues become issues of statewide concern. As we know, the state of California, the Attorney General are limiting what are municipal affairs pretty much on everything they do. So the likelihood of challenge is significant. You'd have to have a three-part test. The extent of the city's control over the project, the fact that that only city funds were used on the project, and the fact that the project was local in nature and scope. You'd have to make all of those determinations. The risks are that you're going to get bid protests. Bid protests based on the federal laws, bid protests based on the fact that it's not a municipal affair. If you get bid protests, the projects slow down. The bid protests are extremely expensive and often lead to litigation. So you have to weigh that against a very, very limited municipal affair project that is either under $60,000 or is extremely limited with no federal funds. And again, still no guarantees that you don't get challenged by a bidder based on the federal constitutional changes. For example, this came up in connection with the Huntington Electric bid. It was a $300 difference on a $198,000 contract. I would assume had we awarded that to a local preference, the second bidder is going to challenge a bid like that. They would be motivated by a $198,000 contract to do that. I think in this environment where the state legislature and the courts have been undermining local control, it's very, very risky. So in my opinion, the risk far outweighs the benefits.
Thank you. My intentions were good ones, but
they were noble.
I mean, that would grant funding would just eliminate everything.
Absolutely, any kind of grant funding from state, federal funds, and again, it goes beyond that. The state of California is expanding, what is deemed to be state control over local projects.
Thank you.
Mr. Metzler, would you like to add anything further?
I have nothing further to add.
Madam Clerk, could you and I'm now confused. Do he pull it back, or we still discuss it and vote on it, or?
I think the issue was to discuss it. It was at discretion of the council for the action. My recommendation strongly is to not try and pursue a local bidder preference.
Thank you. So, Madam Clerk, could you please read the recommendation?
Any action is at the discretion of your honorable city council.
Thank you. At this time, we'll do technical questions from the council. Councilmember Jones?
No, but there's going to be no motion, so there's going to be no comments. I'll just make a comment here.
Thank you.
I'm presuming there's not going to be a motion, but when this was brought up for to request it to be on the agenda, I actually had a question whether or not this was legal. So I guess in a way it could be, but it comes with a lot of costs, and we know that the state's sphere of influence is increasing by the minute. So I can't imagine that our council is going to, proceed in a way that's going to put us in jeopardy.
It could be legal if you rely on your city charter.
Right.
And very few cities have done it. Still does not immunize yourself from challenge.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Gomez?
Yes. How does the proposed expansion of local vendor preferences to high desert companies ensure that we're not just partnering with regional organizations, but also actively engaging and supporting growth in other potentially overlooked areas like Riverside through innovative programs?
This item doesn't contemplate that.
Okay. The next thing is, has the city explored models from other regions that successfully integrate small businesses into city contracts, such as Riverside's approaches or other counties' innovative business growth strategies to ensure a more dynamic and expansive economic development plan?
Relating to this item, we have not.
Okay, the next question is, in the effort to broaden economic opportunities within the high desert region, has there been consideration for specialized federal outreach programs that specifically support and develop women-owned or veteran-owned businesses, ensuring that growth extends beyond traditional business categories and truly embraces interdisciplinary and inclusive practices within the context of this item?
Relating to this item, we have not.
And my last one is, I know that there's an informal bidding process that's been exercised and that continues to be exercised by staff with discretion, where there is no formality or need for contacting multiple contract bidders. So I don't see why this concept that Mayor Pro Temp Harriman brought could not fit in that aspect by merely providing the understanding to staff who exercise such discrepancies that this is the will of the city council.
I'm sorry, that sounded more like a statement.
Well, I mean, you can consider it as a statement. If you want me to formalize it as a question, I can. So because I know staff members have discrepancy and they don't have to always go through certain categories with formalities, why is it not that through the direction of the city council, the CEO can provide the spirit of the law and let those that practice discrepancies say, hey,
Time is up.
when you do this, maybe
Councilmember
consider it
Irving,
that matter.
do you have anything to say? Any questions?
I'm sorry, I heard a numerical figure, and if it's okay with the city manager, can Mr. DeBernowski clarify whatever he said about $60,000?
Certainly, $60,000 under your existing municipal code is allowable. You can give a bidding preference to projects that are under $60,000
Oh,
right now.
Okay, that's what I thought I heard. Okay, thank you, that's all. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I do have an additional question whenever it's.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So, Mr. Metzler, no matter what the bidding process is, whether it's a little less formal per se, if it goes out to bid or not, that does in no way implies that our city staff doesn't give full weight to appropriate consideration.
That's absolutely correct. We've got a very clearly defined purchasing code. Of course, it's defined based upon the nature of the service and certainly the value of the service, but we do have a process, very defined process we have to go through before we make a decision about the selection of services.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Harriman, do you have anything else?
No, I guess not. I mean, I understand it all, you know, I just, after reading all the information, that all makes sense. I just, you know, the item, you know, missing out by $300 when the job is almost 200,000. I just like money earned in the high desert to stay in the high desert. So my intentions were well, but I totally understand what.
There actually used to be preferences under redevelopment law, but those all got eliminated. So, and now, you know, we follow the public contract code, and when you do that, it absolutely prohibits local preferences.
Thank you.
At this time, I'll invite a motion for this item.
I thought no
I don't think
action.
it needs.
Well, I have to ask for a motion. When there is no motion, then the motion dies. But first I have to ask for the motion, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Not you. Correct?
Well, if there's going to be no motion, then there's no moving forward.
Okay. Is there a motion on the item? No motion, item dies. Item 21, Mr. Metzler, let's hear your report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. I think first, I'd like to share with you some activities on the fire side of the house. Saturday, April 22nd was the first day we stood up Medic Squad 315. So that's effectively your third squad being placed into service, mainly to help mitigate the call volume as it relates to the medical calls impacting your frontline engine company. So now effectively you've got 3 of 5 stations with a medic squad to help us better respond to the medic service calls. On April 6th, just yesterday, we actually we received, it was delivered, Medic Truck 311. That's our new tiller. So we actually have it in possession. It still has some work to be done to it, such as outfitting it with radios and equipment. And so that work is begun. But we do have that tiller now housed at Station 311. I do want to thank you, the council, for actually attending the tower graduation, tower number 6 graduation we had this last Wednesday, May 1st. That's where we actually recognized the 6 firefighter EMTs that we actually put through the tower, and they're actually now running on your new medic squads. And so with that, we also have on the code enforcement side of the house, Animal Care and Control Division will be hosting an animal adoption event this Saturday, May 11th at our Amargosa office between the hours of 11 a.m. And 2 p.m. So you're looking for a furry friend, we have plenty for you and your family. If you can't make it, our next animal adoption event will be the following Saturday on May 18th, again at Costco. And we love going to Costco. We get some amazing attention there. On the engineering side of the house, Bear Valley Road reconstruction project update. Construction is progressing well on Bear Valley Road. The base paving on the south side of the road is being completed this week by C.A. Rasmussen, which will switch to traffic on the south side of the road, begin removals on the north side next week. So construction is progressing well there. On the community services side of the house, community services holding our Victorville Sings auditions, as we have for the last few years now. Auditions will be on May 15th from 5 to 8 p.m. 15 contestants will be selected from that audition to move on to compete in our summer concert series with a chance to win $500. Also, we've got kids age 0 to 17 years are encouraged to participate in the Farmer Boys Book Club at the Victorville Library now through May 31st. We also have the Victorville Summer Recreation Guide, which is now available. And stay tuned for a notice about our groundbreaking for the Victorville Library later this month. I will be forwarding this with you because it also, I will be forwarding an email to you with this update along with the development activity report, and you can thumb through that to see what development activities taken place in your community. That's all I have at this time, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 22, discussion and possible action regarding upcoming agenda items. Councilmember Jones, do you have anything?
I have no requests, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Irving,
I'm sorry, I don't have any requests. Thank you.
thank you. Councilmember Gomez.
Yes, in light of the June, I believe June 6th workshop that's coming up, I understand that it's very important to come across the portfolio or the interactions of the consultants who will be dealing with our mayorship, all of these instances. I know I lost the word, but mayorship, and it has to do with our policies. And so one of the things that was very important is to understand if this particular consultant had enough understanding of what it looks like when there's structural racism, and can that person bring in inclusivity?
Councilmember Gomez.
So that's the
Councilmember
motion
Gomez,
that I
hold on.
wanted to bring.
There, I'm real lost with what the motion, we need something to discuss at the council meeting.
And I proposed it. I can reframe it.
You can, please.
Yes, yeah.
Please.
So a motion is in place before the June 6th workshop to analyze the portfolio to ensure that these consultants have in their playbook, so to speak, what is called expertise in interdisciplinary when it comes to structural racism and inclusivity.
I don't really, what are you saying? Because I think I second your motion.
Yeah.
I second her motion.
I'm not even gonna try to, Jen, do you have her motion down?
I think I do.
Okay.
It basically, she wants to analyze the portfolio of the consultants with interdisciplinary inclusiveness. Is that correct?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so I have a first by Councilmember Gomez, a second by Councilmember Irving. Can you take the vote, please?
Councilmember Gomez,
Aye.
Councilmember Irving,
Yes.
Councilmember Jones,
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman,
No.
Mayor Becerra.
No.
Motion fails.
Anything else?
Oh, no, that was all. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Harriman?
I have nothing.
And I have nothing. Item number 23, reports from council members. We're gonna get started with Councilmember Irving.
Well, I don't have anything to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jones?
Sure, just attended my usual meetings, SBCTA, VVWRA. I attended recently the SCAG annual meeting, and so I was already down the hill, and apologize for not having been able to attend the Tower 6 graduation, but kudos to all of our new graduates. And that's it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Gomez?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Harriman?
Um,
Mayor Pro Tem, sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. Yeah, I also attended the Tower 6 graduation, and I just find that those events are such morale builders for our fire department. You know, again, I've said this 100 times. My son's a fireman, and he says they never do that. So I want to commend Bobby and everybody, city manager. I just find that to be fantastic for our fire department. And that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Some of the same meetings I went to also with Councilmember Jones. But I would like to bring it out. I've attended the downtown street vending fair 2 or 3 times already. I would like it to put out there on May 16th at 5:30 here at City Hall. They're going to have the Sidewalk Street Vendor Educational Outreach. Anybody that's lost about it or has questions or concerns, that would be your day to come in and meet with staff. I don't know what division is putting it on. Mr. Metzler, if you have anything else you'd like to add to that, then that's all I have. Is that nothing? Okay. Okie dokie then. Then it, huh?
it's 5:30.
Yes, May 16th, 5:30, here at City Hall.
Okay.
Okay? Time is 8:49 and meeting's adjourned.
So that's an outreach to get these people if they're
No.